have it. Welcome to another tutorial here. I'm going to be doing things a little differently with this one. So first off, I'm going to give everyone this this TOE file that you're looking at, just because this one's just too complex to try to do a full walkthrough and show you how this whole thing was made, for one. And for another, I also based this what's going on with the statue in the middle on a tutorial by Heckmann, which is available on YouTube. It is this one right here, Point Clouds in Touchdesigner, and I'll put the link in the description. I edited it a good bit, but it began life as the file from that tutorial. So what I want you guys to do with this one is I want you to kind of do exactly what I did with Heckmann's tutorial. I want you to do it with mine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean out all of what I've done with the MIDI here, just because you're going to have different hardware than I do, and I'll leave you this MIDI in shop. But just to show you what I'm working with here, I have an M-Audio Oxygen49 MIDI Controller. This will work with any MIDI controller, really. You're just going to have to figure out what its channels are called, and I'll show you how to do that. I have that. That's running into Touchdesigner. It's just feeding MIDI info in. None of the sound that you hear has anything to do with Touchdesigner. That's all running in a separate program. That's all in Logic. It's all just the ES2 synth, one of their prepackaged synths. Good, just good basic kind of multi-oscillator additive synthesizer. Anyway, but I just have this kind of noisy patch with a lot of wobbles. Tied to the mod wheel, and then that same movement, the mod wheel, is tied to all kinds of stuff in my patch here. And as you can see, when I move the mod wheel, it's doing stuff regardless of whether or not I actually have sound playing. Same with the pitch bend wheel. You notice my particles start moving up or down depending on which direction I'm going here. And then that filter sweep that you were hearing also has a separate effect in Touchdesigner associated with it. So the thinking was just kind of, all right, what knobs make the most drastic or intense effects on the synthesizer, and then how do I tie those to visual effects that will match that kind of intensity? So that was sort of the thought process. And the kind of the three things that make the biggest difference in that particular synthesizer patch are going to be the wobble, which is just filter cutoff, volume automation, and some other stuff tied to an LFO. So my mod wheel controls the rate of my LFO, so you can kind of hear it. I have a delay on there, pardon the delay, but you hear it creeping in. Yeah, whoop, 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 whoop. Faster, 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 faster. That's as fast as it goes. So that, like, the more intense, or the shorter the wobble, the more intense it sounds. So I have the mod wheel kind of doing most of the animation in Touchdesigner. And then the pitch bend and that filter sweep are kind of the other knobs that were really making a big difference. The only other key that I used in this is just my low C. And that's acting just to pulse my feedback loops. It's a lot more obvious when I'm zoomed out. Yeah, there we go. So that's what's happening from a very zoomed out view. I also have a little particle system, very basic, just a sphere with 100 rows, 100 columns, into a sort, into a particle, into a null, and then instancing. And then again, I have some MIDI parameters tied to the number of births. Here, I'll show you. So if I go to particles, you can see as I turn the wheel, it moves from 15,000, if you're watching right here, down to 100. So it changes the number of particles that are active in my system for a given birth. And then same, we also have some stuff edited here. The external forces in the X direction are tied to the mod wheel, and then the ones in the Y direction are tied to my pitch bend wheel. So yeah, a little different. But that's what's happening with the stuff floating around, stuff in the middle. Like I said, is based on a different tutorial by Marcus Heckmann, in which he takes an OBJ file, converts it into a point file using this tox right here, which I'll include. All you got to do to make this thing work is find a .obj on your computer. I'll just delete this one, for instance. What else we got? Yeah, it's downloaded already. Perfect. All right, so anyway, same one. I'll just drag it back. You just find an OBJ on your desktop. You drag it in here. This was already in there, so it automatically connected it. But once it's in, drag it into this tox, which will be saved in the file you get. It's in the, like I said, link to downloads in the description. So just go into this tox, and you'll see that you have this sort of fancy thing happening here. You might get this warning depending on what the OBJ file is. It's just telling you that you don't have UV attributes, which we're not really concerned about for what we're doing here. I think something in his tutorial actually used the UV attributes to do something, but it's not, we're not actually using it on anything. So it's in here. Don't worry about it. If your OBJ has it, great. This isn't a fatal warning. It's just a little like, hey, did you know? Don't worry about it. It's fine. All this is set up to spit out an EXR file, which you can use as a point file in tops, which is nice. All you have to do is go here to all the settings are where they need to be. If you want to see what they are or what's been changed, you can hit this little thing. It'll show you all the stuff's been changed. And then you hit record, and it'll spit this out as an EXR file to probably, I think it defaults to desktop on mine. And then you don't need that anymore. You can delete that, or actually I wouldn't. I'd save it because it's a handy thing to have. I'd save it as a separate tox. But what you can do once you've got the EXR file is you can load it in using a point file in top. So you don't have to use the same EXR file that I used. I'll include it, but you don't have to use that. You can go and find your own. You can make whatever kind of point cloud you want. You can 3D scan. You can depends how crazy you want to get. It's up to you. You can make your own. But that's how you get it from an OBJ file to an EXR file, which we can use in tops. So, all right, cool. This should all be set up to go, so you can just load in whatever you want. If it's not, shit, I don't know what to tell you. Should be. Anyway, this what's happening to this statue once we have it loaded in is what's happening in this kind of convoluted chain of stuff here. It's a couple of different feedback loops are essentially just changing the EXR file. EXR files look like this, and that's what's being used to instance all these little rectangles, and creates, in effect, a point cloud. But what we're doing is we're manipulating the EXR image to distort and so forth with feedback, which is the advantage we have if we're using tops rather than SOPs. We can use all these different texture operators. So what I did with Heckmann's tutorial, like I said, what I want you to do with mine is go through and find places where you can manipulate things, find the biggest changes. One of the easy, big, obvious changes that works is when you pulse a feedback loop. So I like to have something like a root note key or a kick drum or something tied to a feedback loop pulse. In this case, I just have the low C on the keyboard there, tied to my feedback loop pulses, two of them. That's kind of an easy one. You can do that with just about any patch. Pulsing feedback loop will make a nice hit kind of look. There's a matting operation going on here, which, to be honest, I'm not even 100% sure what that means. But as you can see, as I switch between these inputs, and this is the same kind of thing you can do with this entire network, just go through and start messing with stuff, see what looks good. And then when you find something that looks, good at a number of ranges, then you can figure out, all right, well, on my MIDI controller, I have sliders, I have wheels, I have buttons. Would it be good to have a slider that moves between those values where it looks good? Would it be good to have it tied to my wheel? Would it be good, whatever. That's just sort of the thinking. So the matting, messing with that input switcher, it did some stuff. So I tied my mod wheel to it again. The mod wheel, I really like letting the mod wheel kind of control most of the stuff. We also had some noise in the feedback loop that if you mess with the exponent, that really changes the look and feel of everything. So I tied my filter sweep knob up here to the exponent. And I'll show you how to do that specifically in just a second. But anyway, as you can see, when the exponent's all the way down to 0, we really can't tell that this is a statue. I guess I should probably show you this with the noise off. Yeah, there we go. So that's the statue. But when I have my noise on, that's obviously, that looks a little different. So I have that going on. That makes a cool effect. You could animate any of the stuff going on with the noise is a prime candidate for changing or animating using MIDI. I had this one highlighted to do something similar with, but I never did. So you can just kind of look. It's like the lower this exponent goes, the more blown out this cloud is. So that could be kind of a cool one to have associated with something. I don't know. But closer to form, more destroyed. Closer to form, more destroyed. So yeah, that noise is also a potential. But anyway, you can just kind of go through these different tops and just mess with stuff and see what it does to the overall look. And then if you find something you like that ranges between a couple values, then that's prime candidate for MIDI automation. So that's really all I have the MIDI tied to on this side. Just my feedback loops, this input switcher on the mat, and then the exponent on my noise, and then the stuff happening up with the particles up here. I do have a couple of things happening in my post-render network over here. Actually, first let's talk about this. I have one more thing. In the render network itself, I actually have so what I have going on here is I wanted to make the camera move further away or closer depending on where my mod wheel's at. So the way to do that is kind of complicated, but we use this, this setup for creating these nice smooth LFO waves that I've done in a few other tutorials, the polyhop method. I drag this to animate my camera. We have a look at null in there, so it's always staring at the center. And then what I do is I animate my camera in a circle with these. Now, to widen the range of that circle, right now it defaults from -1 to 1, so your camera is going to be operating in a circle with a radius of 1 away from the origin. If you want the camera to be further away, you just multiply that entire Python expression, our op1, lookup, chan1, times something. As you can see here, it's times a whole other expression, but you could just multiply this by an integer. and your X translate would then be, an LFO with range -8 to 8 rather than -1 to 1, and then you do the same thing for Z and you still get a circle. It's just a bigger circle. So what I did was I wanted the circle to get bigger and smaller, camera to move further away, but continue moving in a circle. So what I did was I added a math in the mix, and then what the hell did I do? So I dragged that channel over. So I have my op1. So I have this chop times the output of math 17 of this, which is dependent on the wheel position. So whatever the outcome of this one is gets multiplied by the outcome of this one, and then we get our camera position. So it's essentially like adding or multiplying our camera position by a coefficient determined by where the mod wheel is. Boy, that's a lot of tech babble. Anyway, it looks like this. And I'm not like super crazy about that. I think the movement's a little harsh, but whatever. That's what we got right now. So we have that happening in our render network. Then in our post render network, mod wheel is tied, I believe, again to okay. So a few things. So we have so our ripples here. I wanted them to get more. I wanted them to get more intense depending on where my mod wheel's at. So there's two parameters making the ripples look more intense. One is this blur in my displacement loop here ahead of the slope, which if you watch the audio reactive ripples, you probably recognize this particular feedback pattern. So that's one. And the other one is the blur after the slope. So so I wanted, our most intense moments, which would be when the mod wheel's up, just based on what our synth is doing. Mod wheel's all the way in the up position, and our pitch bend is bent all the way to the up position, and our filter knob is all the way up. So I essentially just stacked all these parameters on top of each other so that the ripples would look the smallest and therefore the most, I guess, just have the most chaotic when all of these things are at their peak. And the way to do that was to have all of these blurs that are making these nice kind of these nice creamy ripples over here is to have those blurs go away. So as my mod wheel goes up, if you watch my hand, but also watch the screen, watch the filter size, notice it's going from 1 when the mod wheel's up to 16, a higher blur when the mod wheel's down. So I had to invert those values to get smaller ripples when it's up, bigger ripples when it's down. Same thing essentially is happening here, just different values. This one looked best when I took it from 10 to 26. Same thing, inverse. It's the number's low when I'm up high and high when I'm down low, and all you do to achieve that is you just use a math chop, and you take whatever the range of your MIDI channel is. In this case it's a wheel, so it's 0 to 127. I'll show you how you can figure that out too. And then just having my low value associated with the high value on the blur, and then the low value associated with the high value, boom, you have an inverse relationship. Yay. What else? Oh, right, and then I have my pitch bend wheel. Pitch bend wheel also messes with my pre-shrink, I think. No. My there we go. So my not pitch bend. It's the filter cutoff knob. So my filter cutoff knob is also inversely related to the pre-shrink value on my blur. The lower my pre-shrink, the smaller the ripples, and the higher the filter knob, the more intense the sound. So again, just trying to. My thought process was, what are the dynamics of the synth sound when I mess with these controls? What happens to the synth sound? Okay, how can I translate that visually? And that was what I came up with. So, all right. So that's what we're looking at just in terms of the patch, mechanically speaking. Or not mechanically speaking, just kind of bird's eye view of what you're seeing on the screen here. As far as mechanics going, really the only thing you need to make this work is a MIDI controller and the MIDI in chop. There is a great tutorial on YouTube about using MIDI in Touchdesigner by Matthew Reagan, which I would suggest watching, which shows you how to not only use this, but also to create a more permanent map that you can save. So if you want to have, a MIDI controller that has all of its various buttons, sliders, knobs, keys, whatever, mapped, and you want to carry that from one project to another, you can do that without having to go through this sort of tedious process here that I'm about to show you. But you see all these channels. This is right now. This is every key that my MIDI controller has, with the exception of some of these. I don't know, some of these weird ones to do with channels and octaves and looping or something. But just sort of all my keys and so forth. You can see that. There we go. And since Logic is still on, you can hear it. So the MIDI in chop, you can pull any of these keys in. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass because you have to go in and look and figure out, okay, if I want it to be the mod wheel, where's the mod wheel? Oh, okay, it's called channel 1 control 12. Great, that's not totally ambiguous. Or control 2, sorry, control 2. That's the pitch bend knob going there. Notice it has negative values. And then all my key presses have a velocity value that comes in with them. See? Hit it hard, 0.5. Anyway, we can use those velocity values for things as well. But the way to pull in your MIDI controller is with this MIDI chop. It's going to try to pull in just whatever you have defaulted as device 1. If you have never used a MIDI controller in Touchdesigner, then you're not going to have a device 1, so that doesn't really make sense. So what we need to do is go to our dialogues menu, MIDI device mapper, and then here's mine. This is the one that I have. So you won't have this. You may just, if you've already done this, you might have your MIDI controller in here, in which case it's probably redundant anyway. But if you haven't and you have a MIDI controller, all you need to do is come in here and hit create new mapping. You may need to do check MIDI devices just to see. Just to refresh if you just plug something in, and then whatever your MIDI controller is should be available from this menu. The only thing I have plugged into my computer right now is this Oxygen49, so it's the only thing popping up. This should happen automatically. If it's not, you may need to download some drivers or something for your MIDI controller. I'm not sure. MIDI troubleshooting is kind of outside of the scope of this. But anyway, you just select your device from here. Just select same input and output device. And then you may notice over here, there's a MIDI map option. We're just going to leave that as none. If you do want to learn how to create a map for your specific device, like I said, Matthew Reagan has a great tutorial on how to do that. And it can be a little more convenient than every time having to scroll in and look and see what your channels are. When you have a fresh MIDI in, by the way, you're not going to have all those channels that you have to, for some reason, you have to play them all for it to work. So If I have a new MIDI in over here with the same settings, same device selected, same everything, you may notice that there's nothing in here. If I zoom in, there's no channels. Whereas if I zoom in here, there's, you know, quite a few channels. So what I have to do is I actually have to hit all the keys to make sure that there's information coming into Touchdesigner. So, so you notice if I hit my low C, then I get just one. It's just, there's only just one channel in there. If I move up a half step, oh, we have two. So on and so forth. So you literally have to go through and play all the keys that you want to use on this thing if you plan on using them as controls. Like I said, I really only used 4, so I didn't actually have to go through all this. I really just needed to use the ones I wanted. But you know, good to know that all your channels are in fact outputting information, that Touchdesigner is receiving it, whatever. You can go through and you know, play all the keys chromatically to get all those channels in. Spin your mod wheel, spin your pitch bend, if you have sliders and so forth, you know, spin them as well. And spin them all the way, get the range of values appropriate, and there you go. Then you have, I guess, a palette to work from with your MIDI device. So once you've done that, the way to access all of these different channels it's really simple. It's the same way you do it with alt chops. You just make the viewer active, and then you could just pull the raw info directly into something and have, you know, if you wanted just a low C key, you could have the velocity info from that channel associated with, you know, a particular value in our loop. Excuse me, our air conditioner's out, so it's really hot in here. All right, anyway, yeah, so if you want the raw data, you can just make the viewer active and just grab it out of here. However, we're probably going to want to manipulate it a little bit. So what you can do to manipulate individual channels is you can just use a select chop. So out of my MIDI in, once you've got your MIDI controller set up, you figure out which key or button or slider you want to use, and then the way to figure out what channel that's coming from is just to go in here, and you can literally just watch. So if I want my mod wheel, spinning my mod wheel, there it is. So I know the mod wheel is channel 1 control 2. I know pitch bend is, oh, pitch bend has its own name. That's nice. Wish the mod wheel had its own name. Oh well. Anyway, I can take that and go to, here's the mod wheel right here, and go to a select chop and get just that mod wheel isolated, so that I can then do things like take its range, which by default with MIDI is 0 to 127. I can take that range and change it to something that makes sense for different parts of my patch. So for instance, I wanted to control particle births, so I changed my range from 0 to 127 to 100 to 15,000 to control the number of particles per birth in my particle system here. With this math, I did -1 to 1. What is that controlling? Oh, that's right. That's controlling the force up here. So I kind of already showed you what these were controlling when I went through the patch to begin with. This is just sort of the mechanics of how you do it. So you just grab a select, and then you manipulate your range using math. You're using a math chop. Yeah. So, and you kind of select what keys you're using based on what effect you want. If you want to toggle, you're going to want to use a button. If you want, you know, if you want a smooth transition of values, you're going to want to use a wheel or a slider. So yeah, if you want something really jolting, button's going to be the way to go. If you want, you know, anyway, redundancies. But yeah, same thing with my other controls here. I wanted the pitch wheel, so I went into my MIDI in. I figured out which channel it was. It has its own name, so then I just put a select chop down here, selected that channel by typing its name in right here, and then I renamed it just so I could follow this. This is just a select chop. Same thing with this knob C10. It's labeled C10 on my keyboard, so that's what I labeled my select chop here. That's really all it is. It's just it's those controls being selected out of this palette of controls to select from, and then really it's just the range is being manipulated. There was one thing about this whole patch that I wasn't super crazy about that I wanted to fix live. Let me get a couple extraneous pieces here that we don't need. But like this, so the camera movement, I'm not crazy about that. I wish it was, especially because I like to ride the mod wheel, so it can be a little jerky. So what I wanted to try to do for the camera animation was I wanted to put a lag so that when just for that camera animation on the mod wheel, it takes a second after I move it for it to take effect, and same thing when I move it back. So let's figure out which. Okay, so I dragged a math chop way the fuck over here, so I could. So it was easier to get to the camera here. So so it's this one right here. This is coming off the mod wheel out of the MIDI thing way over here. If I zoom out far enough, you can see it. Yep, there it is. There's our MIDI. There's our mod wheel. Boom. Way over here is our math. So this math, like I said, it's creating that expression that we're multiplying our already existing camera animation expression by to get this kind of distance coefficient based on where the mod wheel is. But like I said, I don't like how choppy that looks, so we're going to add a lag chop in. Lag, there we go. All right, so I think I want a little more lag than the default. So what the lag does is nice. It's kind of like an attack and decay for an envelope in synthesis, for like a volume envelope. This first value is like the attack. So whatever your signal is coming in, it's going to delay it from onsetting. It's going to lag it by 0.5 seconds. And then same thing as when you let go or when that value turns off, it's going to take 0.5 seconds to move back down to 0 or to move to its next position. I'm not sure how this is going to work with a dynamic control, but I didn't want the camera motion to be quite so jerky. So this should, let's find out. So it's a little smoother. You can kind of see if you're watching where my hand is from the little phone video in the corner. You can see it's delayed a little bit, but I think I want this to be more drastic. So I'm going to go 1 and I'm going to put 2 on the back end. Let's see. Yes. Okay, so it just sort of melts into position. Yes. Okay, so this is cool. This is much, I prefer this. All right, cool. So, I mean, some other things that you could do. There's always post-render stuff. There's like there's an edge top in here that, you know, whatever, that's a slightly different look. There's a noise top in here. If you don't want to use the ripples, you can, you know, get this kind of thing going on. There's this whole bloom situation you can mess with. There's some Luma level stuff in here. Just, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can mess with. Throw stuff in post-render, see what it looks like. Use the image filters. I love the image filters. A lot of these are great. I use the RGBA delay all the time. Let's see what this looks like. Might hurt our frame rate more than I want. We're already pushing it with 30, and I've got a pretty nice machine. It's probably look better ahead of the bloom, although I do kind of like what it's doing to some of the foggy stuff after. That's pretty neat. What does it look like when I move? Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a little, not my thing personally. Let's take that up there, and then, all right, so if I put it in front of the bloom, then okay, you know, it's a little much. Maybe if I bring down the my wet dry mix, it's kind of cool. Anyway, some, you know, whatever, stuff to try. Very sweet. So yeah, all kinds of post-render stuff you could do. Try it with different OBJs, mess with the particle system, make it into, you know, different shapes, mess with the sphere. I think that's why I had a super formula up there. I was using that instead of a sphere. And mess with mapping your own MIDI controller parameters to different parts of this. You can, this is essentially just a thought exercise. It's like, all right, what, you know, you got to kind of take a few things into account. What, you know, what does my synth patch sound like? What's the vibe I'm going for? Do I want the visuals to directly follow that vibe, or do I want them to do their own thing? I mean, it's just, it's art. It's art. You got to, you know, think, what do I like? What do I want to do? And then trial and error your way through it until you come up with something you like. Yeah, so this is just sort of what I did. Boom. All right, cool. So I'm going to yank that RGBA delay out of there, and then this will show you what you're going to get. So, so let's save this as, this is going to be MIDI underscore tut. All right, and then so what you're going to get is you're going to get a MIDI file in, and then what you're not going to get, whoops. You're not going to get any of those. You're not going to get any of these. I need to put that back to... All right, I'm going to have to put the camera back to I need to get rid of this secondary expression based on my mod wheel, just because it's, you know, you won't necessarily have it. So I need to do like, this will just be the camera rotating about the origin. Yeah, and then okay, yeah, this should be fine. Okay, so you won't have the camera distance animation unless you set that up yourself. Again, just remember the way to do that. The way to do that is to take take your existing expression, and then it's a little annoying because you're going to have to take your math out of your MIDI in here. That you want to multiply this by, and then you're going to have to paste that expression somewhere else and then paste it in here, because it's not going to allow you to just drag it in and add it on, since that's not the workflow. When you drag a chop channel and it, you know, just replaces what's here instead of adds to it. So so yeah, you can do that if you want. If you like the camera animation thing, that's yeah, that's cool. So there you go. That's what you'll get. Let me just change all these back to. I'm just gonna put my keyboard in back on these, so you can pulse these feedback loops without having to completely remap everything first. And then this we can just put there. And then this, let's just put that. Cool. All right, so I don't think there's any, oh yeah, I need to fix these. Okay, so our post render stuff. Let's put these back to, there we go. All right, so this is what you will get. Beautiful. Okay, so the ones that I highlighted here were ones that I found to be useful for mapping MIDI to. Oh, missed a warning here. Sorry, let me just fix these. There we go. And then this needs to just be 1,000. There we go. Okay, cool. What else? State. Oh, that's right. Okay. Let's just put our keyboard. Let's attach our keyboard to that too. There we go. Okay. All right. Great. Now I think everything is at least working. So when you get this, it should be fine. Just check. All right. That's what resetting does. Cool. Okay. All right. Good. Great. So things to keep in mind for this when you're looking at this, delete that. I'll include the EXR file of this statue in the zip file with this. However, if you want to use your own, this Tox, this SOP to top Tox is going to be in the file, so you should be able to just drag an OBJ file and connect it to the input here, and then do that workflow I showed earlier where you go in and do just use the movie file out, and then load it in through your point file in here. Is anything in here actually doing anything? Huh. All right, so I don't actually know what these are going to. What is this? Export. Where is it exporting to? Nowhere, apparently. All right, I'm just going to delete these. I don't think we really need this info chop. All right, great. Cleaner. All right, so I'm going to put this stuff up here. So we're going to have our SOP to top Tox, and then we're going to have our MIDI in up here. The particle system is up here. Our non-MIDI chop stuff, just our timeline is right there. It looks like I have a second one of these for some reason. Don't need both. All right, cool. So that's what you're going to be working with, and feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help troubleshoot as much as I can. I know this the MIDI stuff can be a little bit daunting, but I mean, you can do so much with it. So there you go. See you next time.